Stephanie White walked into the Indiana Fever locker room with a mission: transform a talented but relatively inexperienced team into a championship contender. Her first move: creating a bulletproof plan to evolve Caitlin Clark's game beyond what defenders can possibly prepare for. Looking it up, all of your history and stories, and I'm like, this is a real indie gal. Like, born in Indiana, you played your college ball in Indiana at Purdue, you played for the Fever in the WNBA along other stops. In coaching, you actually were an assistant coach with the Fever, and now here you are, back as the head coach of the Indiana Fever. Behind closed doors, White has been crafting a revolutionary system that will unleash Clark, Boston, and Mitchell in ways we've never seen before. The technical details she just revealed show exactly how she plans to shock the WNBA establishment and fast-track Indiana's rise to the top. This isn't a rebuild, it's a reinvention. So what is White's exact game plan? And how is it miles apart from what previous Fever coach Christy Sides had in place? If you're pumped for the Fever season, comment champions down below. Let's go. You've got an interesting roster that you're heading into as the head coach, and we focus in on the now for the Indiana Fever. You've got a unique locker room. It is undoubtedly super talented, but it's such a mashup of unique personalities, and I'll also say established storylines for each of these players. There are some players that haven't figured out what they're about, or the storyline hasn't been created for them in the W, and you've got all of this coming into your locker room. So, season's on the way. What are going to be your first priorities, maybe even exercises in creating common ground and meshing this team? When Stephanie White returned to Indiana, she didn't just bring a clipboard and whistle. She arrived with architectural blueprints for a basketball empire. A few months into her tenure, we're finally seeing the foundation of what she's building. And it goes far deeper than just collecting talent. The Fever's 20-win, 20-loss record last season might look respectable on paper, but anyone who watched them against the league's elite teams saw the truth. There's a next level that could further be unlocked. Christy's Sides and the Fever's supporting cast just weren't cutting it. Against championship contenders like New York and Las Vegas, the gap in execution and defensive cohesion was glaring. Having stars like Clark, Mitchell, Boston, and Hall wasn't enough. White knew this required a complete system overhaul. All of those players are going to help us on the defensive end of the floor, which has been our greatest deficiency. And so I think that having veteran players who understand what it is to be a part of this organization, who are not afraid of all of the things that come with being a part of the Indiana Fever, and who ultimately, at the end of the day, are great teammates, great people, and just want to win. What's fascinating is White's laser focus on defense as the cornerstone of championship aspirations. While fans marvel at Caitlin Clark's logo threes, Kelsey Mitchell's insane buckets, Aaliyah Boston's post moves, and Lexi Hull's accuracy from deep, White recognizes the uncomfortable truth. Offensive fireworks alone won't bring championships to Indianapolis. The Fever allowed 82.2 points per game last season, ranking in the bottom half of the league. Championship DNA starts with stops, not just highlight reel buckets. It was really important who we added in free agency and in the off-season fit who we already had. I mean, look, our big three with Caitlin and Kelsey and Aaliyah, you gotta have certain kinds of vets that fit around them. That number one, fill the gaps that we need. I mean, in our lineups, in our rosters, but number two, have accomplished, multiple things that can lead them in a way that they haven't been led before, but also understand where they fit in the scope of what the Indiana Fever is about now and what we're about in the future, and that give us a chance to compete for championships. The recent roster moves reveal White's strategic vision. DeWanna Bonner wasn't acquired just for her scoring prowess. She brings what White calls that mother hen energy, fiercely competitive while simultaneously nurturing young talent. These veterans aren't random additions. They're specifically chosen puzzle pieces who complement Clark's playmaking, Boston's interior presence, and Mitchell's scoring punch. White isn't constructing a team of individual stars, but rather an interconnected unit where each player's strengths. The most intriguing aspect is how White draws from her previous coaching experiences, particularly understanding what it takes to build a contender from the ground up. She's seen firsthand how championship cultures develop, and she's implementing those lessons with surgical precision in Indiana. White understands that championship DNA can't simply be taught in film sessions. It must be experienced, embodied, and transmitted from veterans who've climbed that mountain. That's why Bonner and Howard aren't just playing roles on the court. They're transmitting championship habits and practices, film sessions, and team meals. You have a generational talent. Sometimes that word is thrown around, but I think it's really fitting here for Caitlin and her talent and her potential at the point guard position. Those championship habits are crucial, but they're just part of White's master plan. Ever wonder why the most unstoppable players in basketball aren't always the ones with the ball? Stephanie White certainly does, and her revolutionary strategy for Caitlin Clark directly challenges everything we thought we knew about the rookie phenom's game. From just a straight basketball perspective, making sure that we help her diversify her finishing ability, diversify in the way that it's not predictable, to be able to being equal in terms of production and facilitation, go on right and left. Clark's historic debut season came with a hidden cost. With the ball constantly in her hands, she faced an onslaught of defensive pressure that grew more sophisticated with each passing game. Double and triple teams became the norm. Traps arrived earlier. By season's end, opponents had essentially built their entire defensive schemes around a single mission: stop number 22 at all costs. This defensive attention created a predictability problem. When Clark couldn't break free, the Fever's offense often stagnated. That's where White's off-ball revolution comes in. Instead of having Clark initiate every possession, White plans to transform her into a movement-based weapon who can strike from anywhere on the court. The challenge for us as coaches is, how do we get a rest when she's on the floor, while she's playing, right? Like while she's on the floor, and some of that's going to be playing off ball, utilize her as a screener, getting her into action on the third and fourth side instead of the first and second, where it's easy to game plan against. Now how we use her to help everybody else be better off the ball, we know how great she is with the ball in her hands. We're not going to take that away, but we've got to be able to diversify a bit in how we use her. This approach mirrors how the Golden State Warriors deploy Steph Curry. Constant motion that exhausts defenders while creating unexpected scoring opportunities. One moment Clark might be setting a screen, the next she's popping out for a three-pointer from an angle defenses never anticipated. The benefits extend beyond tactical advantages. By reducing Clark's time as the primary ball handler, White addresses another critical issue: fatigue. The rookie's late-season performance occasionally suffered as the physical toll mounted. This new approach gives Clark precious moments to catch her breath without removing her impact from the game. White's developmental blueprint goes beyond X's and O's. Clark's competitive fire, while essential to her greatness, sometimes burned too hot during her rookie campaign. With 6 technical fouls, tying for second most in the league, Clark's intensity occasionally worked against her. But let's be real, not all of these fouls were deserved. Having conversations about what it means to show your fire and like, you don't want to take any of that away, because that's what makes her special, right? But to channel some of that, in a way that may not hinder RT. You don't want to stifle the things that make her great. But you also have to take into consideration all of the things that go into the ultimate opportunities for success for your team. White emphasizes her role in helping Clark channel that passion constructively. The coach is encouraging Clark to study Fever legend Tamika Catchings, who mastered the art of controlled intensity. Clark herself has set a concrete goal: cut those technicals down to 2 or fewer next season. This multi-dimensional approach creates a version of Clark that's nearly impossible to game plan against. When defenders can't predict where she'll attack from or how she'll be used, they're perpetually off balance. The ball-dominant point guard who dazzled college basketball is evolving into something far more dangerous: a complete offensive threat who can demolish defenses with or without the ball. The Clark revolution is just the beginning of Stephanie White's basketball reinvention in Indiana. Remember when centers were primarily just rebounding machines and rim protectors? Those days are about to disappear for the Indiana Fever, as White quietly engineers perhaps the most radical positional makeover in the WNBA. And it's happening with Aaliyah Boston. I think Aaliyah is an outstanding facilitator as well from that post position, though we're going to use her a little bit more like a hub, right? Like a little bit more like a Jokic, in how she gets the ball, whether that's in the trail, in a lot of our stuff in flow, or whether that's on the block. White has made a stunning NBA comparison that reveals everything about Boston's future. That's not just coach speak. It's a blueprint to transform Boston into the Fever's offensive centerpiece in a way that's rarely been seen in women's basketball. Think about what makes Jokic a 3-time NBA MVP. It's not just his scoring. It's how he orchestrates Denver's entire offense from the center position. White sees that same untapped potential in Boston, whose basketball IQ and court vision have been somewhat handcuffed by traditional center expectations. Those 2.7 assists per game Boston averaged. White plans to dramatically increase that number. The traditional center positioning, camping out on the low block waiting for entry passes, creates predictable offensive sets that elite defenses can easily neutralize. But what happens when you suddenly position your 6 feet 5 inch center at the elbow, at the top of the key, or even in transition as a facilitator? Defensive schemes collapse into confusion. That's exactly what White is banking on, as opposed to just, everybody knows a strong side pick and roll is coming. You saw a little bit more movement, a little bit more usage in her in terms of facilitating, and a little bit more versatility in her game. Challenging her to become a consistent, doesn't have to be high volume, but a consistent 3-point shooter, like looking for those. Being able to use other aspects of her game, outside of just pounding with her back to the basket. Boston's transformation isn't just about where she'll receive the ball, but what happens next. Unlike centers who catch and immediately look to score, Boston will serve as the offensive hub through which the entire Fever attack flows. Cutters, shooters, and secondary playmakers will all operate around her, creating a dynamic offense that's nearly impossible to scout effectively. What makes this approach particularly dangerous is the natural chemistry Boston has already established with Clark. Their two-player game showed flashes of brilliance last season, but now White plans to supercharge that connection by creating situations where both stars can feed off each other. Imagine Boston facilitating from the high post while Clark works off screens. Then reverse the roles with Clark driving and finding Boston for easy buckets. But White's vision extends beyond just passing. She's challenging Boston to develop a consistent 3-point shot, adding another dimension to her offensive repertoire. This would force opposing centers to defend Boston beyond the arc, creating massive spacing advantages for the entire team. When defenders close out, Boston can then leverage her improved playmaking to attack off the dribble or find open teammates. The ripple effects of Boston's transformation will be felt throughout the roster, particularly for scoring dynamo Kelsey Mitchell. Where Mitchell often had to create her own shots in previous seasons, Boston's enhanced playmaking will deliver cleaner looks and reduce the defensive pressure Mitchell faces. This offensive ecosystem helps everyone thrive in their optimal roles. I thought last year, and you look at her numbers, it was the most efficient year that she's had. Less shots, most efficient, right? All-star performance, she's an all-league performer in my mind, no doubt about it. But I think our system, in the way that we can continue to play to her strengths and put her in positions for success, I think it's going to be really good. We're going to free her up to just play. We're going to use her and Caitlin and a lot of stuff together. We're going to use them as screeners and a lot of action to then open them up. We all know, everybody knows, if you're a great scorer, if you can be a great screener, you're going to get a lot more shots. This Jokic-inspired redesign represents a fundamental shift in how WNBA teams typically utilize centers. Rather than compartmentalizing players into rigid roles, White is creating a fluid system where positional distinctions blur. Boston won't just be a center. She'll be an offensive fulcrum who can punish defenses in multiple ways while still maintaining her interior defensive presence. White's approach here is revolutionary because it challenges the conventional wisdom about positional roles in women's basketball. By borrowing concepts from the NBA and tailoring them to her personnel, she's creating something that WNBA defenses haven't had to contend with before. The question isn't whether Boston can handle this expanded role. It's whether opponents can figure out how to stop it. Last year, the Indiana Fever and, quite frankly, Caitlin Clark saw unprecedented levels of attention, and that meant coverage, fandom, and sometimes it could be hard on the players, even toxic. So I want to just understand, I'm sure you had to have given some thought to this and stepping into this unique position on your philosophy of protecting your players and also even players of other teams. Beyond the X's and O's of basketball innovation, Stephanie White is building something even more crucial for the Fever's success. A psychological fortress designed to shield her players from an unprecedented wave of toxicity. Her three-word philosophy says it all. Don't be a jerk. This isn't just casual advice. It's the cornerstone of White's culture revolution in Indiana. The spotlight on Caitlin Clark and the Fever has brought millions of new eyeballs to women's basketball, but with that attention came a tsunami of criticism and personal attacks. This is precisely why White has made protecting her team's space a top priority. She's creating what amounts to a sanctuary within the locker room where players can focus solely on basketball without the noise of social media seeping in. White draws a clear line between legitimate basketball criticism and personal attacks targeting things outside of basketball. Clark herself has addressed the issue, calling the hate sad and unfortunate, while pointing out that those engaging in such behavior aren't true fans but trolls whose actions do a real disservice to the WNBA. White's response has been to add veteran leaders who understand how to navigate these treacherous waters. The addition of Sydney Colson wasn't just about adding depth. It was a strategic move to bring in a steadying influence who can help maintain positive chemistry when the pressure mounts. Colson represents the kind of veteran leadership that helps younger players separate constructive criticism from toxic noise. Is one of those players who can nip things in the bud in a locker room without it having to get to us as coaches. Builds our depth on the perimeter, as it's a little bit more versatility with Caitlin and Kelsey and what we do with them. Really important to get somebody of her caliber. Certainly for us, White's protective approach extends to how players interact on the court as well. Individual statistics take a backseat to team success, with selfless play and collective responsibility forming the bedrock of the Fever's identity. This holistic approach treats mental health as equally important as physical development, creating an environment where players can thrive regardless of external pressures. As we look at the blueprint Stephanie White has constructed, it's clear she's light years ahead of what the Fever's previous coach was building. What really stands out is her commitment to sustainability over immediate gratification. She's explicitly stated that this Fever rebuild isn't about quick wins. It's about creating a foundation that supports championship contention for years to come. When the core pieces of this team fully integrate into White's system, we're looking at something revolutionary. The Indiana Fever won't just be competitive. They'll be setting the standard for how WNBA franchises develop their talent and construct their identities for the next generation of women's basketball.